Hello, and welcome to our launch of the 2023 edition of the Asia and the Pacific SDG Progress Report. This year's theme is championing sustainability despite adversities. We're very pleased to have you join us today in person at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, as well as online via Zoom. Joining us today is our panel who will be presenting the findings of the report. Starting with my right is the Executive Director of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission, Executive Secretary, I should know better, the Executive Secretary of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ESCAP, Ms. Armida Saucia Alice-Jabana. To her right is Rachel Bevan, who is the Director of the Statistics Division at ESCAP, and on the far right is Armin Bakhtarian, who is a Senior Statistician at ESCAP. This year's edition of the Asia-Pacific SDG Progress Report, which is one of the flagship publications of ESCAP, it provides an overview of SDG progress in the region and serves as a foundation for many of the other activities conducted by ESCAP and our partners. This year, the report shines a spotlight on countries that have demonstrated commitment and progress toward the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So with that little bit of introduction, let me turn it over immediately over to Ms. Alice-Jabana. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Very good morning to colleagues, friends. Welcome to the launch of the Asia-Pacific SDG Progress Report 2023, Championing Sustainability Despite Adversities. So, may I now introduce briefly the report. The report provides an update on current progress towards the SDGs in our region. In addition, the report identifies the most persisting data gaps and provides guidance to countries to overcome data hurdles. This year, we have also worked with 7 other UN agencies to spotlight countries in the region which have taken evidence-based initiatives to progress on the SDGs. Please allow me to highlight some key results from the report. Again, this year is the midpoint progress report of the SDGs, and towards 2030 target year, our region should have made 50%, of course, halfway of the progress needed to achieve the goals. However, the overall progress is only less than 15%, meaning only 1/3. Yeah, what is needed. So based on current trends, achieving SDGs will take several more decades. At the regional level, our report shows the strongest progress in the region has been made on affordable and clean energy, or Goal 7, and industry, innovation, and infrastructure, or Goal 9. So only 2 goals, out of 17 goals. And in particular, climate change, which is Goal 13, continues to regress, meaning going in the wrong direction, and must be given priority to reverse the negative trend, particularly in countries in special situation. So countries in special situation, again, UN terms, is for the LDCs, the least developed countries, for the landlocked developing countries, and for the SIDS, or countries, small island developing states, such as Pacific. Despite the slow pace of progress in the region overall, there are good examples of data-oriented initiatives at the country level to achieve the SDGs. For example, India has managed to reduce child marriage and the adolescent fertility rate. Cambodia, Pakistan, and Timor-Leste have taken actions that increase the rate of births attended by skilled personnel. Pakistan is working with the UN to improve the processing of identity documents for refugees. And Indonesia created a centralized data platform to better manage cases of trafficking in persons. I'm certain that this list extends far beyond. This is just a very few examples. And I'm pleased to recognize that countries in our region are increasingly using data or evidence-based to inform decision-making. Despite improvements in data availability, significant gaps still remain for gender equality, life below water, and peace, justice, and strong institutions. The report identifies existing resources and provides tools to bridge the data gaps for Goal 5 and 16. Again, Goal 5 is this on gender equality, and 16 is on peace, justice, and strong institutions, which I hope will encourage countries to improve data production and availability. And finally, I would like to extend my sincerest appreciation and thanks to our partner, the UN system, especially to the UN entities that directly contribute to the report. And again, thank you very much, and looking forward for the discussion later on. I would like now to officially launch the Asia Pacific SDG Progress Report 2023 and ask my colleague here, Rachel, Director of the Statistic Division, to share more detailed findings of the report. Over to you, Rachel.
Yes, thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. Rachel?
Thank you so much. So good morning to all of you here in the room and online. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to invite you to watch a short video. Thank you.
In 2015, 193 countries came together and adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. 2023 marks the midpoint of the agenda, which is an opportune moment to reflect on our progress. The Asia-Pacific region should have made at least half of the progress required to meet the goals, and while some goals have advanced, overall progress has been slow and acceleration is required. Despite slow progress, some countries in the region have made impressive gains, setting good examples for others to follow. In Timor-Leste, 143 health workers trained in emergency obstetric care have been deployed across 73 community health centres to address the low percentage of births attended by skilled personnel. In India, support for schooling, life skills training and improved access to sexual and reproductive health services reduced child marriage from 50% in 2000 to about 25% in 2015, leading to lower adolescent fertility. In Cambodia and Pakistan, skilled birth attendance has increased, reaching approximately 70% and 98% respectively through education and training, resulting in lower maternal mortality. In Cambodia, childhood stunting is the highest in the region. Between 2014 and 2021, this has been reduced from 34% to 22% by increasing investment and targeted support. In Pakistan, nearly 1 million biometric smart identity cards were issued to the increasing Afghan refugee population to better determine assistance needs and protection programming. In Timor-Leste, diaspora finance was recognized as a developmental priority, resulting in remittance inflows increasing from $62 million in 2015 to $155 million in 2020. These examples demonstrate how better evidence can enhance government's decision-making. Bridging data gaps is crucial for achieving the SDGs in the Asia-Pacific region, and it will necessitate unique approaches that reflect each country's needs and capacities. Both poor and rich countries must show their commitment to SDG monitoring and assume national ownership of indicators. To achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Asia-Pacific region must act quickly, think smarter, make intelligent investments, strengthen global partnerships, and build on the collective commitment to the SDGs to achieve a sustainable, prosperous, and inclusive future for all.
Thank you. I have the huge pleasure this morning to share with you the key highlights from the 2023 Asia and the Pacific SDG Progress Report, championing sustainability despite adversities. This is the 7th in our series of annual SDG Progress Reports, which ESCAP has produced since the adoption of the SDG agenda in 2015. And this year, ESCAP has partnered with 7 other UN agencies in the region to produce the report, and you can see these shown on the screen. So let me first start with the key findings from the report. We're now at the midpoint of the 2030 agenda, and whilst we can see progress is being made, with less than 15% progress, this is still too slow to achieve the SDGs by 2030. We see the strongest progress being made on Goal 7, affordable and clean energy, and Goal 9 on industry, innovation and infrastructure, but progress is still too slow. Significant efforts are still needed, especially for countries in special situations, to achieve the SDGs, and for all countries, more work is needed for Goal 13 on climate action. This year, we've looked at which countries are PACE leaders, that is, those countries which are performing above the average, above the regional average on at least one of the goals. And from this analysis, we see that 70% of the PACE leaders for Asia and the Pacific are countries in special situations. However, we also see that many of these countries were starting from a very low base, which means that although their pace is above the regional average, there's still much more that needs to be done. We continue to see an increase in the availability of the data to monitor the SDGs. What we also see is that it's poor and rich countries alike that need to do more on SDG monitoring, and especially for Goal 5 on gender equality and Goal 16 on peace, justice and strong institutions. And let's move now to looking at how we're doing as a region. So if we look at overall progress towards achieving all 17 of the SDGs, we see that in 2017, the region had made only 4.4% of the progress needed. In 2022, this increased to 14.4% of the needed progress, but the rate of progress is slowing down. Indeed, based on the current rate, we should expect to achieve the SDGs in another 42 years. Now, let's look at each of the 17 goals. To be on track, the bars should at least reach the 2022 line in the middle of this chart. And similarly to last year, we see good progress on Goal 7, affordable and clean energy, and Goal 9 on industry, innovation and infrastructure. But we can also see very clearly that we're not on track to achieve any of the 17 goals by 2013. Progress is too slow or stagnant, including for Goal 13 on climate action, where the region's moving in the wrong direction. Now if we move to looking at the target level, based on the current levels of progress, we can see 13 of the targets there, shown in green, are the only ones which will be achieved by 2030. The majority of the targets are shown in amber, and those are the ones where we need to accelerate progress to meet the targets by 2030. And the targets where we need a complete reversal are the 21 targets shown there in red. And whilst the availability of data continues to improve, there's still many targets shown in grey which can't be measured. Indeed, for Goals 5, 14 and Goal 16, we have less than 30% of the needed data to monitor them. We also see that progress is uneven. This is particularly the case when we look at countries in special situations. That's the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. We can see here how for these there are more goals where a complete reversal in trend is needed, and in all 3 sets of countries this is the case for climate action. And in small island developing states, they also need to reverse the trend for responsible consumption and production, Goal 12, and for clean water and sanitation, Goal 6. Moving on, let's look at the impact of COVID-19 and what we know from the data. Prior to the pandemic, the region was not on track to achieve any of the SDGs by 2030, but the pandemic and other global challenges are further hampering progress. And whilst we do not yet have comprehensive data on the impact of COVID-19, we can see that in half of the countries which have recent data on poverty, their rates of poverty have increased. Indeed, in Georgia and Kyrgyzstan, we see an increase in poverty rates. We also see increases in food prices. And on this chart, we can see that for Australia, Pakistan and Bhutan, they're experiencing the highest food price anomalies based on 2020 data, which was the latest data we had. But we also know that COVID-19 has had an impact on the planet. And we might have expected that with widespread COVID-19 lockdowns, there would be a positive impact on the environment. But from this data, we can see that whilst the amount of renewable electricity per capita has steadily increased between 2019 and 2021, the rate of growth has reduced from 14% in 2020 to 10% in 2021. But we also see other negative impacts on the planet as well, such as an increase in beach litter, which has gone up from 3.36 million tonnes in 2019 to 3.92 million tonnes in 2021. COVID-19 has also had an impact on employment and productivity. Unemployment rates increased between 2019 and 2020 in the Pacific, Southeast Asia, and North and Central Asia. And we've also seen a decrease in the growth rate of real GDP per employed person, which has gone down from 3.6% in 2019 to just 1.3% in 2020. This year, for the first time, we're also looking at progress at the country level. And we have new resources on our SDG Gateway where countries can see their national SDG trends at the indicator level and compare these with the regional average. And in this chart, we've identified the top 5 countries which are outperforming the average regional pace of progress. So across the 17 goals, we see that most countries are actually outperforming the regional average in at least one of the goals. That it means that most countries are showing some areas of good performance and that there are clear lessons that we can learn across all countries. But there's an exception. That's for Goal 5 on gender equality and Goal 13 on climate action, where there are actually no countries outperforming the average regional pace of progress. And in the report this year, we've also included some more detail on some specific country policies where data is being used to make that positive difference to people's lives. So in Cambodia, they've been implementing a national strategy for food security, and that's helped them to reduce stunting among children under the age of 5 from 34% in 2014 to 22% in 2021. And Cambodia also launched a clean air plan in 2022, where data is being used to actually increase the understanding of the problem and to provide evidence to formulate new policies and actions which will address the major sources of emissions. In India, we see how data is being used to systematically review interventions aimed at reducing child marriage, and how by using that information they've been able to better target interventions, and that's helped to decrease the child marriage rate from around 50% in 2000 to 25% in 2015. In Pakistan, with a big investment in upskilling midwives, they've increased the percentage of skilled birth attendants to 69%, and that's benefiting mothers and babies. In Pakistan, they've also been implementing a document renewal and information verification exercise for Afghan refugees, which is providing really important information on what assistance is needed, and it's helping them also to design the most appropriate programs for this group. In Timor-Leste, the UN has supported the training of 142 healthcare workers since 2018, and that's helping also to improve the rate of safe births. Also in Timor-Leste, they've developed a national diaspora engagement policy and action plan, which recognises the important contribution of remittances to development. It's helping them both to leverage those flows and to make better use of those finances. Whilst we've seen that big improvement in the availability of SDG data, indeed between 2017 and 2022, the number of indicators with sufficient data has actually doubled. But we can see here that the momentum on increasing data availability continues to slow down, and data remains insufficient for 51 of the 169 targets. But the UN partners have actually developed a lot of new methods and tools to improve the SDG monitoring and to help to fill some of the gaps. This includes new resources on how to make better use of existing administrative records, as well as resources for specific surveys, such as ones on corruption and victimization, and there are also a range of capacity building resources. So we have the Center of Excellence for Statistics on Crime and Criminal Justice in Asia and the Pacific, also the Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific. And in Indonesia, they've got an integrated database for managing case data for trafficking in persons, and that's helping them to build profiles of victims and perpetrators, and that information is being used to design better interventions. But these are just some of the resources which are now available, and there's a lot more detail on all of these and more in the publication and on the website. So this year, we've also added an interactive publication that you can go into on our website, and there you can actually explore the data in much more detail. So you can then click on things and see the underlying data, and that also allows you to see the country level progress assessments, and by looking at those you can compare them as well with the regional averages. So our report is available online. You can click the QR code, you can go into the ESCAP website. We've also got the summaries here in the room for people that are here, so please have a look at those. But thank you for listening, but also a huge thank you to all my team, but also to all of our partners who've worked together to put this report together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and Madam Executive Secretary, for the presentation on the findings of the SDG Progress Report. Now we have some time for questions and answers. We did receive a few questions ahead of time, so perhaps I'll just start with those before giving folks in the room an opportunity. Let me direct this first question to our colleagues from the Statistics Division. I said that last year the progress report was not very optimistic, an estimated 35-year delay in achieving most of the SDGs, and this year we hear that the pace has slowed even more. Has the past year shown that we're narrowing or shortening this time frame to success? So obviously you've mentioned that the pace is slowing. What other steps can we take to narrow that gap then?
Thank you for the question. As it was presented in the opening remark as well as the Rachel's presentation, data does not suggest that we are narrowing the gap. We are actually slowing down. We are halfway through our journey to 2030, but we have only made less than 15% of the progress needed. So the pace isn't enough, but it is also slowing down.
Another question we received is on particularly with related to China and Indonesia. Do you have any detail about progress at the country level in those two countries?
Yes, again, as was presented this year for the first time, we have shown progress at the country level in the report, which is highlighting the countries making relatively faster progress on at least one goal compared to the regional average. But in addition to that, on the Asia-Pacific SDG Gateway, countries can see their national SDG trends and compare their progress with the regional average progress. We, of course, understand that the progress assessment is responsibility of the governments, but ESCAP is supporting governments to produce their SDG progress dashboards for their VNR. And at the moment, with development of the national SDG tracker, more than 10 countries in the region are actually producing the same sort of SDG progress, and we are ready to work with more countries. So no comment on specifically on Indonesia and China, but their data is also available on the SDG Gateway.
Let me direct this next question to Madam Executive Secretary. Are there ways in which we can reverse the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate challenge, and global food insecurity and other disruptions?
Again, this so-called triple crisis, yeah, which all countries, not only in our region but globally, are facing, namely the COVID-19 pandemic, although it's receding, and secondly, of course, this ongoing long-term climate change, and increasingly, we are seeing the impact here. And also the nexus, for our region in particular, the nexus of climate change and disaster, natural disaster, which further exacerbate the impact. And third is, this geopolitics. Yeah. Although in some instances, geopolitics, again, the Ukraine war is somewhat distant, but impact, right? So therefore, and all these are shown, yeah, in the SDG progress. But what lessons learned, yeah, that we see from all these triple crises, as well as how for countries to be better prepared. One is for COVID, yeah. So for sure, and also climate, for sure, better preparation, preparedness, including at country level, in terms of future crisis, future pandemic, and so on. So therefore, data is key. Yeah, data is key. Not only data in terms of health-related data, including the impact, can better prepare countries, yeah, especially countries' governments, to prepare better for future crises such as pandemics. Including also climate change, yeah. And second is, again, we see is the elevated risk, yeah, elevated risk. It's intensifying in frequency as well as impact, right? This is the second lessons learned. And third is in terms of solutions. I'm sure everybody is very much interested in solutions. It's not only on the impact and all this, the lack of progress, yes, solutions. But again, learning from COVID-19, yeah, I mentioned earlier during the interview before the session, is one of the silver lining is this digitalization or digital transformation, yeah, which is, especially for our region, is huge and big. So how to, again, accelerate, bearing in mind also the risk, of course, yeah, all this governance, and targeted also to the segment of population that can benefit, especially the young, yeah, and therefore it can accelerate, yeah, including it can also show maybe the change in the way we are doing things, yeah. So therefore, for example, for working, yeah, and so on and so forth, therefore at the same time also can reduce the carbon footprint, right? So in other words, how we can leverage, yeah, all this new innovation and so on that can benefit also the several objectives that we have to tackle. So the better preparedness, the climate change, yeah, including the impact, reduce carbon footprint, and so on and so forth. So maybe that in short, yeah, if I may to respond to your question.
Thank you. Let me give the opportunity for folks in the room to ask a question. There is a microphone in the back. Please go ahead and just, if you don't mind, identifying yourself and your affiliation.
Morning. May Wong from CNA, Singapore Television Station. My first question is, out of the 17 goals that you've highlighted here, you've actually noted that Myanmar is actually one of the pace leaders achieving almost half of these SDG goals. How concerned are you that this may be giving a false impression given the current military coup worsening situation in the country? And my second question is, given the fact that Myanmar is still in the midst of a military coup right now, how is that going to perhaps cause the country to regress in terms of these goal achievements? And also, how is that going to perhaps affect and put a drag on the goals for the entire region in Southeast Asia? Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel?
Thank you. So I think this is the first time that we've very much used an evidence-based approach to actually identify. So we've looked at what data is available. So this is very much based on what data is available, and that means it is different for all the countries. So as you say, for Myanmar, for Afghanistan, there has not been much recent data. But it means that we've taken a very evidence-based approach, and we've looked at from the data which is available, which are those countries that are making better than average progress compared to the regional average. So this is just based on the data that's available. But it does show as well that in those countries they were making good progress a few years ago. So this is looking at progress since 2015. And they were definitely making some faster progress. But as we say in the more detailed report, this really depends on the level at which they began. So their 2015 level. And that's where it's important to actually look at the detailed report to get more information on that. But we provide that information to really highlight that it is a mixed picture and that there are good things that we can learn across the board and that countries are pursuing different policies, which is leading to different rates of progress.
Thank you.
Maybe
you'd
I
like to
can
add? Yeah, go ahead,
clarify
please.
one more thing related to the same graph is that those countries are not the ones that are expected to achieve the goal. Those are the ones that have been making faster progress compared to the regional average. They could still be far away from their 2030 targets. But as Rachel explained, this is all based on the data available, and specifically on those countries you mentioned, Myanmar and Afghanistan, there is very little data after the crisis in the country.
Thank you. We have another question?
Hi, this is Munira Ahsan, postdoctoral researcher at the Asian Institute of Technology. My question is, forced displacement has become a major concern in South and Southeast Asian regions. So since I haven't had the chance to go through the report, my question is, to what extent this forced displacement is being discussed or taken, care of by the regional report that you have presented today?
Yes.
Yeah, Armin?
Thank you for your question. There are two areas where we tackle this topic. One is within the SDG framework under Goal 10, reduce inequality. We talked about when data is available. We talk about refugees. But also there is, in the second chapter, there is a story where we are talking about how governments have made evidence-based decisions which is affecting lives of this group in both Timor-Leste and also specifically in Pakistan in regards with Afghan refugees. We have been trying to find stories which can be showing how data can be used to improve their lives.
Thank you. You have a follow-up? Yep.
Just to complement your findings, what you have just shared with us, Bangladesh is hosting the largest refugee camps in the world, where more than 10 million refugees are living over the last 5 years now. And Afghan refugees, refugees from Myanmar, they are now scattered in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, as well as Bangladesh, as I have mentioned. So maybe, if you have not already, included these regions or these countries in the analysis, maybe these are the countries in the future report can include. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another question? Yep.
Thank you. John Kapp from Community Systems Foundation. Appreciate the opportunity to hear your presentation today. A few questions on data. Since 2015, we've realized that data to monitor progress was going to be a challenge, and it seems to continue to be a challenge. No doubt partly because of the mandate around leaving no one behind, I'm assuming. I have a three-part question, I think. One is around insufficient data. If you could explain what that means in this context. The second question is around opportunities across the goals to really strengthen data systems, and where you see in your work at ESCAP there's a possibility to improve data systems toward better data. And the third question is maybe an optimistic one. When we see data gaps, when those data gaps are filled, are we pleasantly surprised often that maybe countries are further than we anticipated? Or when those data gaps are filled, generally are you seeing that progress is actually lower and there's a longer way to go? Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much for your question. On the first one, on insufficient data, we have three categories when we assess data availability. Sufficient data means that we have at least 2 data points for more than half of the countries in the region so that we can analyze the regional progress and see the trend. Insufficient means there is some data on some countries, but there is not enough data to see the trend and aggregate at the regional level. It could be that there is more than 1 data point, but on less countries than half of the region, or there is only 1 data point. And no data means there's absolutely no data. I think Rachel can reflect on the second, on the statistical systems.
In terms of strengthening, thank you. In terms of strengthening data systems, we work with all the countries in the region and try to support them as much as we can on that. And we also work with our UN partners as well on that, so some of which I can see in the room. So we are very much trying to work with countries. So as Armand said, we're helping on things like the SDG, National SDG Tracker tool, but we're also helping on very specific areas like ocean accounts to try and improve the information on kind of life underwater, life below water. There are lots of different areas that we're working on. For example, we have a big program on improving civil registration and vital statistics, because that is actually really important and fundamental to many of the SDGs, that countries actually improve, particularly registration of births and deaths. So we're working on that with quite a few countries in the region. And there's a lot more information on our website which says about which countries we're working on specifically on that. Thank you.
And there was a third part of the question.
Surprised?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one, and it's a black box. We don't know because we don't have data yet, right? We can speculate. It depends on our assumptions. If we assume that areas where we do not have data are those areas where we haven't prioritized, so it's likely that if you have more data, it will show a picture of more regression or less progress than what we have. But we don't know until we have data and we analyze.
Thank you, colleagues. Is another question? Yes, please, go ahead.
Very interesting, thank you. My name is Robert Fox, Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce in Thailand. Let us consider that there are 3, if you will, actor groups that might move the dial forward: governments, civil society and NGO, and business. I'm interested in your thoughts on, as a result of this report, which of these 3 actors or drivers are really not doing enough. If we consider the corporate sector, we can see there are 2 areas: affordable and clean energy, and industry, innovation, and infrastructure. which require at least 2 of those above actors to move it forward. The model of corporate governance has changed from 20 years ago, where companies were obliged to act in the interest of their shareholders, and now they have to take into account the interests and requirements of a range of stakeholders. Is the corporate sector letting the side down? Are we doing enough? Do you, in your assessment based on these results, think that all these SDGs are really important, and do we get the connection between good business and doing well on the SDGs? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a good question.
Can I ask? Right.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much for that very enlightening question. If I may, I'll start from the 17 SDG goals, right? From the 17 SDG goals, because you asked about the roles of the actors, government, civil society, businesses, and actually also academia, also part of the very important actors. So if I may a little bit simplify things, right? So the first, let's say the first 6 of the SDG goals, more or less on the social pillar, social pillar. This is where basically the foundation of all the SDGs, if I can put it that way, including poverty, the zero hunger, right? Because nutrition and so on, health for sure, education, although more towards the quality of education, gender, and also water and sanitation, which is a very basic, right? And then, sorry, also SDG number 16, peace, justice, and institution, which lays also the foundation. If you don't have good institution, how can you develop further, right? Then the investment part is, or the economic and also the environmental pillar, are the rest of the SDGs, which are goals 7, the energy, 8, the decent work, economic growth, 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, right? And then 11 is the cities, 12 is responsible consumption production, and then 13, climate, 14, life below water, which is ocean, marine, and then 15, life on land. So this is where all the investment, of course, more sustainable investment that you need to put into that, right? But again, I see it in two aspects. One is all the basic, if you talk about infrastructure and so on, there are certain basic infrastructure that is the domain or responsibility of government. You cannot expect private sector to invest, right? The road and so on, the basic one. Likewise, energy also the basic one, But then after that, how can to tap also the private sector investment? So this is where the question of, again, the responsibility of government to create this enabling environment, all these rules and regulation, right, for the private sector to invest. Otherwise, private sector will not invest. So how the government job is to provide the basic infrastructure plus the enabling environment, rules and regulation, institution, and then the private sector to come in. But of course, if the private sector thinking is only profit, then we are not in a good, maybe we are in big trouble. So this is also, for the CSO and government, how to encourage private sector. But there is one, again, this is one of our priority areas, if I can say, that we work on this particular area quite well, and which is also gaining traction, which is, this is getting the trend, which is the so-called impact investment, inclusive business, social enterprise. Meaning what? Meaning that the business motive is not only profit, or not, even not profit per se, but which is how to create the the social impact as well as the environmental impact. Yeah, so if we could have more of this, yeah, then I think we are in good direction. But at the same time, also how to encourage the private sector, but then all the enabling environment have to be in place.
Thank you, ES. Yeah. One more. Yep.
Hi, good morning. My name is Veena Upadhyay. I'm representing the environmental and social foundations, although it is kind of a new foundations because we established last year only. But prior to this, we have been participating for decades with children and also participated with the Elephants Caravan from Khao Yai to ancient cities with the Greenpeace. And also we have been doing things with the children, like grooming them about how to do about the environmental impact if they are not doing anything. So thousands of children have been using our center in Khao Yai. I have seen this one, and I think the only thing that I need a guideline is that despite that we have been doing this for years, but I don't think that we have the guidelines for putting all the informations or what we have done into the statistics, you know. So if our children that have been doing for us, like lately we have been promoting for the Saras crane extinction in Buriram and help the farmers for doing this organic farming so that all these Saras crane can survive. The issue is that we are unable to get the good guidelines from the government sectors. Despite that, we have been doing, we have started talking with the natural resource and environment ministries. But we really need to have a kind of the constructive way that how to put the statistics so that all the children or whether all the companies that use our centers for the CSR, like doing all these forest plantations, we should be able to keep all these statistics in order to reflect the real worth of our environmental. We need your help. So if you can suggest us how we should keep our data in order to present to the government sector or to yourself so that we also can promote our work in Thailand.
Maybe a quick reflection. Thank you for your intervention. There are some standards available, and maybe after this session we can talk, and I can point to some of the existing standards for establishing your data system, which is available to countries, and I think you can also use for establishing your own databases.
Thank you very much. Another thing is on the 5th June, on the Environmental Day, we will have a group of our students who will make the presentations of their works of the past years. So maybe if the date is fixed and the venue, the date is already fixed, the venue is to be confirmed. So maybe we need some of your presence, maybe to help them or guideline them what they have to do, something. Just only a pre-invitation if possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are winding down our time, but I'd like to make sure we get the questions that we have in the room. I understand that we've also have some questions from our viewers online, and I don't think we'll be able to get to them, but I do encourage you, the folks online, with further questions to contact our colleagues directly at the Statistics Division. We can share with you the email address later. But in the meantime, let's turn it back to the folks here in the room.
Hi. I'm Subel with Radio Free Asia. I cover environment and politics. It seems every single region did quite horribly in climate action. But then the energy was also the best performer it seems, in every region. Can I ask, like, data-wise, how do you see this? Is there this juxtaposition? Is there, is it ironic, or is the, like, what's happening here? And also, I wanted to ask about this one. Northeast and East Asia does not have sufficient data on life below water. Is there a reason why that happened? Like, it's not one of the, developing countries who shouldn't have data, no? Thank you.
Yeah, okay, maybe you have two questions. On the first question, where the regions are not doing well on energy, I wonder which regions you're referring to. If you're talking about...
Sorry. I think the question is, there's sort of a dichotomy. You have a regression in climate action, but people are doing well overall on energy.
On energy.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it goes back to how you're measuring these two goals, because on the climate action, it is the targets that we're trying to achieve is to reduce emission and improve our disaster-related or climate change mitigation policies. But when it comes to energy, it is about our access to energy and affordability of energy and clean energy and investment in energy. So these two do not necessarily contradict. You can invest more in energy and have a wider access to energy, but at the same time, greenhouse gas emissions could go up, which is what is actually happening at the moment. And that's why you see two different directions for these two goals. The second question was about SDG 14, life below water, and you're surprised why more advanced countries don't have enough data. And it is interesting. One of the findings of this report is also that we should not take it for granted. It is not necessarily the case that more advanced statistical systems have better data availability on the SDGs. We have compared the data availability at the regional level against data availability in top 5 countries in terms of GDP per capita. And it turns out that both are not making good progress on most of the goals, including Goal 5 and Goal 16, where we have least data availability. So therefore, this is not a surprise to us.
Okay, thank you. I think, yeah, this time for our last question, yes.
Thank you. My name is Charlotte Axelsson. I'm a freelance consultant on social inclusion. I just have a question around disaggregation of data. If you see any progress at national level on disaggregation of data more into subgroups of the population, knowing they're leaving no one behind, really targeting the most excluded, person with disability, and listening that there is not much progress or even regression on equality and gender. I was wondering if you have if that is included in the report. Thank you.
Thank you again for the very good question. In this analysis, we are using disaggregated data on SDG indicators when available. But as you pointed out, unfortunately, there isn't much data disaggregated. We have used, if I'm not mistaken, less than 30 indicators with disaggregated data in this analysis, which is less than 15% of the total indicators. So, and as you may know, the recommendation for disaggregation is on 8 different variables, but at the moment, we only have disaggregation by sex, age, and urban-rural. We rarely have disaggregation on other variables, maybe on wealth sometimes. So there is a huge need to produce disaggregated data at the country level. And again, if you go to Asia-Pacific SDG Gateway, you can see where disaggregated data are available and for which countries.
Thank you, Armin. And again, that brings us to the end of our Q&A section. Again, for those online who had questions, we do apologize we aren't able to get to you. feel free to send them in to the Statistics Division email. That is stat, S-T-A-T, .unescap@un.org. Again, colleagues would be happy to follow up with you via email on your questions there. So that brings us to the end of our presentation today. Let me give it, I don't know if, Rachel, you have any final words or any, no? Nothing? Okay. All right. Yes, please go ahead.
Just, I think the final thing was to say thank you all for coming also, and thank you as well to all the partners that have put the information together, because we recognize it's a huge effort for a lot of people. And we also, for those in the room, have snacks and cake, which you're very welcome to join. That's the incentive to be here, and there's cake. Thank you.
Yes, did you want to say something?
Yeah, again, appreciation and thank you for everybody, and of course, colleagues that are taking the time to attend in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much to our audience here at the FCCT and also online in Zoom. And again, we do invite you to stick around. The cake looks pretty good, so I hope you enjoy later on. Thank you.